The piercing sound of shattering glass jolted Gabriella Hayes from her sleep, her heart pounding against her ribs as she fumbled for her phone in the darkness. This was the third time this week someone had tried to break into her modest apartment, and she knew exactly who it was. Fingers trembling, she dialed 911, whispering her address to the dispatcher while huddling in her closet, a baseball bat clutched tightly in her other hand. "Please hurry," she pleaded, her voice barely audible. "He's back again." 20 minutes later, the police had come and gone again with the same empty promises to increase patrols in her neighborhood. The broken window in her kitchen was now covered with a piece of cardboard, a temporary fix that did nothing to make Gabriella feel safe. Her stalker, an ex-coworker named Daniel, had been escalating his behavior for months. The restraining order she'd obtained seemed to mean nothing to him. She couldn't stay here another night. With shaking hands, she packed a small bag and called her friend Melissa, who agreed to let her crash on her couch. As Gabriella slipped out her front door at dawn, she didn't notice the black Aston Martin parked across the street or the man inside watching her with concern. Blake Jansen drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, observing the young woman hurry down the street with a duffel bag slung over her shoulder, constantly looking over her shoulder. He hadn't intended to spend his night staking out an apartment building in this part of town, but when his head of security, Frank, had called him about a personal favor, he couldn't refuse. "She's running scared, boss," Frank had explained over the phone. "My niece's best friend." "Police aren't doing jack about this stalker. Guy's dangerous, slashed her tires last week, keeps showing up at her workplace. She's a good kid, just a kindergarten teacher trying to live her life." Blake had made his fortune in luxury hotel development, transforming struggling properties into five-star destinations across the country. At 34, he had more money than he knew what to do with, but not enough time to enjoy it. What he did have was resources and a personal understanding of what it meant to feel unsafe. Making a decision, he started his car and followed at a distance as Gabriella made her way to the bus stop. When she boarded the early morning bus, he tracked its route, watching as she eventually got off and walked several blocks to an apartment complex. Once he was sure she had safely entered a building, he made a call. "Frank, I need everything you can get me on this guy. And I want a security detail on Miss Hayes starting immediately." 2 days later, Gabriella stood in the hallway outside her apartment, staring at the eviction notice taped to her door. Her landlord had cited the repeated disturbances and property damage as violations of her lease. With a shaky breath, she pressed her forehead against the cool wood of the door, fighting back tears. She had nowhere to go. Melissa's tiny one-bedroom couldn't accommodate her indefinitely, and her teacher's salary barely covered her own rent, let alone finding a new place with the security deposit she'd need. Miss Hayes. She turned to find a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit standing a few feet away. His dark hair was cut short, his jawline sharp, and there was something about his presence that commanded attention. "Who are you?" she asked warily, taking an instinctive step back. "My name is Blake Jansen. I'm a friend of Frank Morrison. He mentioned you're having some trouble." Gabriella's posture relaxed slightly. "You know Frank, wait, Blake Jansen, the hotel developer," he nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting in a slight smile. "The same. Frank is concerned about your situation, so am I." "That's kind, but I don't see how you can help," she said, gesturing to the eviction notice. "Unless you're offering me a free room at one of your luxury hotels." She attempted a laugh, but it came out brittle. "Actually, I have a proposition for you." Blake's expression grew serious. "I have a guest house on my property that's currently vacant. It has its own entrance, fully furnished, and most importantly, it's within a gated community with top-notch security." Gabriella stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to stay in your guest house? I don't even know you." "You know Frank, and Frank trusts me. The offer is genuine, Miss Hayes. No strings attached. Just a safe place to stay until your stalker situation is resolved." She studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Blake's eyes clouded momentarily. "Let's just say I understand what it's like to feel threatened." To not be able to sleep because you're wondering if today's the day someone crosses the line from intimidation to something worse. There was something in his voice that rang true, a sincerity that made Gabriella want to trust him despite her better judgment. "I can't afford to pay what a place like that would be worth," she said finally. "I'm not asking for payment. Consider it a favor to Frank if that makes it easier to accept." He handed her a business card. "Think about it. Call me if you decide to take me up on the offer." That night, as Gabriella tried to sleep on Melissa's uncomfortable couch, the sound of a car backfiring sent her into a panic attack. As she struggled to breathe, Melissa's worried face hovering over her, she made her decision. The next morning, she called the number on Blake's card. Blake Jansen's estate was nestled in the hills overlooking the city, a sprawling property surrounded by lush gardens and a security fence that made Fort Knox look accessible. As Gabriella's Uber pulled up to the imposing iron gates, she questioned her sanity for the 20th time that day. Was she really going to move into the guest house of a man she'd met exactly once? The gates swung open after the driver spoke briefly into an intercom, and they proceeded up a winding driveway. The main house came into view, a modern architectural masterpiece of glass and stone that took her breath away. "Holy smokes," she whispered to herself as the car stopped in front of the entrance. Blake was waiting for her, dressed more casually today in dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. The outfit probably cost more than her monthly rent, but something about seeing him in less formal attire made him seem more approachable. "You came," he said, a hint of surprise in his voice as he opened her car door. "I was running out of options," she admitted, stepping out with her duffel bag, "and sleep deprivation was starting to affect my teaching. My kids deserve better than a zombie for a teacher." He smiled, and Gabriella was struck by how it transformed his serious face, creating crinkles around his eyes that suggested he didn't smile enough. "Well, I'm glad you're here. Let me show you to the guest house." They walked around the main house, following a stone path through gardens that would have made any botanist swoon. The guest house turned out to be a charming cottage with a private patio, nestled among flowering trees that provided both beauty and privacy. Inside, Gabriella found herself standing in an open-concept living and kitchen area with high ceilings and abundant natural light. The decor was sophisticated yet comfortable, clearly professionally designed, but not intimidatingly luxurious. "This is not what I expected," she said, turning to Blake with wide eyes. "Too small?" he asked, his brow furrowing. A laugh bubbled up from her chest, the first genuine laugh she'd experienced in weeks. "No, it's perfect. It's just, this is bigger than my actual apartment and nicer, much, much nicer." Blake relaxed visibly. "Good. There's a security system already set up. My head of security, Frank's brother, will show you how to use it. The refrigerator is stocked with basics, but let me know if you need anything specific." "I can't believe you're doing this," Gabriella said, setting her bag down on a plush armchair. "It feels like too much." "It's not," Blake assured her, "and it's temporary. I have connections with the police department. We're going to make sure this stalker of yours is dealt with properly." For the first time in months, Gabriella felt the crushing weight of fear lift from her shoulders. She hadn't realized how exhausted she was from constantly looking over her shoulder until suddenly, she didn't have to. That night, she slept peacefully for the first time since the stalking began. Over the next week, Gabriella settled into a routine. She would leave for her kindergarten class early in the morning, driven by one of Blake's security team who would also pick her up afterward. She rarely saw Blake himself. He was often traveling for business, but when their paths did cross, there was an easy comfort in their brief interactions that surprised her. On the 10th day, she returned from work to find Blake in the garden outside the guest house, his sleeves rolled up as he examined a rosebush with intense concentration. "Are you secretly a gardener in your spare time?" she asked, approaching him with a smile. He looked up, a smudge of dirt on his cheek making him appear endearingly human. "Hardly. My gardener mentioned these roses weren't doing well and I got curious. I know nothing about plants, but I like solving problems." The kindergarten teacher in me feels compelled to help, Gabriella said, setting down her tote bag filled with student artwork. My mom was an avid gardener. These roses need more sunlight. They're getting shaded by this oak tree as it's grown. Blake stood up, brushing dirt from his hands. I defer to your expertise. Would you like to join me for dinner tonight? I've been away all week and was planning to grill something simple on the patio. The invitation caught her off guard. They had maintained a polite distance since her arrival, and this felt like crossing into new territory. But the prospect of eating another meal alone in the guest house held little appeal. I'd like that, she said. Should I bring anything? Just yourself. 7 o'clock. The main house's patio was an expansive space overlooking the city, with a professional-grade outdoor kitchen and comfortable seating arranged around a fire pit. Gabriella arrived precisely at 7, having changed into a casual sundress that felt appropriate for a backyard barbecue, even if this backyard was the size of a small park. Blake was already at the grill, a glass of red wine in one hand and tongs in the other. He had changed, too, into fresh jeans and a gray Henley that accentuated his broad shoulders. When he looked up and saw her, something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or appreciation. You look nice, he said, setting down his wine to pull out a chair for her. Not that you don't always, but he stopped himself, looking slightly flustered. Thank you, she replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. So do you. It's nice to see you in something other than a suit. Dinner was simple but delicious grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and a quinoa salad that Blake admitted had been prepared by his housekeeper. The conversation flowed easily, starting with safe topics like Gabriella's students and Blake's recent business trip, but gradually becoming more personal. How did you get into hotel development? She asked as they moved to sit by the fire pit, the evening air growing cool as the sun set over the city. Blake swirled the wine in his glass, considering his answer. It wasn't my original plan. I started in commercial real estate after college, just a regular job at a firm downtown, but I had this idea about repurposing struggling historic properties into boutique hotels that honored their past while providing modern luxury. And someone took a chance on you, he laughed. No. I took a chance on myself. I emptied my savings, took out loans, and bought a derelict former bank building in Portland. Everyone thought I was crazy. It took 18 months of 16-hour days and more setbacks than I can count, but when we finally opened, it was an instant success. The rest sort of snowballed from there. Gabriella was impressed by his passion as he spoke about his work. This wasn't a man who had been handed his fortune, he had built it through vision and determination. What about you? He asked. Was teaching always your dream? Since I was old enough to line up my stuffed animals and give them spelling tests, she admitted with a smile. Though the reality is both better and harder than I imagined. My kids this year are amazing, they make me laugh every day, but the system is challenging. Limited resources, too much bureaucracy, parents working multiple jobs who can't be as involved as they want to be. Yet you stay, she nodded. I stay because on the hard days, there's always at least one moment a child understanding something for the first time, a shy kid finally participating, a note from a parent saying their child can't stop talking about school that reminds me why I do it. Blake studied her with a thoughtfulness that made her both self-conscious and seen in a way she wasn't accustomed to. You're remarkable, Gabriella Hayes. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. I'm really not. I'm just an ordinary person trying to do some good in the world. There's nothing ordinary about you, he said softly. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. Finally, Blake cleared his throat and stood to add another log to the fire. Any updates on Daniel? She asked, bringing the conversation back to safer ground. Blake's expression darkened. The police picked him up for questioning yesterday. They found evidence in his apartment linking him to the vandalism at your place. He's being held while they build a stronger case. Relief washed over her. So it might be over soon. It looks that way, he confirmed, which means you'll be able to get back to your normal life. The thought should have filled her with joy, but instead, Gabriella felt an unexpected pang of sadness at the idea of leaving this sanctuary and Blake. The next morning, Blake was unusually distracted during his executive team meeting. His COO had to repeat a question twice before Blake registered it, earning him curious glances from around the conference table. "Sorry," he muttered, focusing on the quarterly projections displayed on the screen. "Go ahead with the Dallas property update." The truth was, his mind kept drifting to the previous evening with Gabriella. There had been a moment by the fire pit when he'd nearly reached for her hand, nearly told her how her presence in his life these past days had awakened something in him he thought had been buried for good. But he had stopped himself. She was under his protection, dependent on his help. It would be inappropriate, even predatory, to pursue any kind of romantic connection while she was vulnerable, and yet the way she had looked at him across the flames, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Blake, we need your decision on this," his CFO prompted, breaking into his thoughts. "Let's postpone the renovation until next quarter," he said, making a snap decision. "I want to focus resources on the new Seattle acquisition first." After the meeting adjourned, he remained in his chair, staring out at the city skyline from his corner office. His assistant poked her head in. "Frank's on line 2, says it's about Miss Hayes." Blake picked up immediately. "What's wrong?" He got out, Frank said, his voice grim. "Daniel, some procedural error with the evidence collection. Judge released him an hour ago." Blake's blood ran cold. "Where's Gabriella now?" "At school." "We've got eyes on her, but—" "Increase the detail. I want 2 people on her at all times, and I'm going to pick her up personally today." When school let out that afternoon, Gabriella was surprised to see Blake's Aston Martin parked in the faculty lot instead of the usual security SUV. As she approached, he stepped out of the car, his expression serious. "What's happened?" she asked immediately, recognizing the tension in his jaw. "Get in the car first," he said, opening the passenger door. Once they were both inside, Blake explained the situation. Gabriella's face paled as he spoke, her hands gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. "So we're back to square one," she whispered. "Not exactly," Blake said, starting the engine. "We know more now, the police are building a stronger case, and you're safe at my place." As they drove, Blake's phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. He answered to hear Frank's urgent voice. "Boss, we've got a situation. Someone tried to access the property through the service entrance. Security apprehended him. It's Daniel." Gabriella gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "How the hell did he know where to find her?" Blake demanded, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Must have followed one of our vehicles at some point. He's being held in the security office. Police are on their way." Blake glanced at Gabriella, who was now trembling visibly. Without thinking, he reached across and took her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "We've got him, Gabby. It's over now." She nodded, but tears were streaming down her face. "I just want this nightmare to end." When they arrived at the estate, police cars were already parked by the security gate. Blake drove straight to the main house, ushering Gabriella inside and into his study, a warm room lined with bookshelves and leather furniture. "Stay here," he said gently. "I'll handle this." An hour later, he returned to find her curled up in one of the oversized armchairs, staring blankly at a book she clearly wasn't reading. "He's gone," Blake announced. "They arrested him for trespassing, violating the restraining order and attempting to break in. With the previous evidence and this incident, they'll be able to hold him this time." Gabriella looked up, her eyes red from crying. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. "The detective said they found a notebook in his car with detailed plans to abduct you. It's serious enough now that they'll keep him locked up while they prepare for trial." A shudder ran through her. "I don't understand why he fixated on me. We barely knew each other at work." "People like that don't need logical reasons," Blake said, his voice gentle, "but you're safe now. I promise you that." Impulsively, Gabriella leaned forward and wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face against his shoulder. Blake stiffened momentarily in surprise before returning the embrace, holding her as she released all the fear and tension she'd been carrying. "Thank you," she whispered against his shirt, "for everything." "You don't have to thank me," he murmured into her hair. When she finally pulled back, their faces were inches apart. Blake could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, count each of her eyelashes still damp with tears. Something shifted between them in that moment, the careful boundaries they had maintained dissolving into something new and undefined. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Blake leaned forward. Their lips met in a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened as Gabriella responded, her fingers threading through his hair. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Blake rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that for days," he admitted. "Me too," she confessed, a smile breaking through her tears. "But I thought it would be inappropriate given the circumstances." "It probably is," he agreed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But I don't care anymore." In the weeks that followed, Daniel pleaded guilty to multiple charges and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Gabriella found a new apartment in a secure building that Blake insisted on vetting personally, but she found herself spending most nights at his estate anyway. Their relationship blossomed in the spring sunshine, each discovering in the other something they hadn't known they were missing. Blake found in Gabriella a warmth and genuine compassion that balanced his more intense, driven nature. She helped him remember to pause, to appreciate the small joys in life that his relentless work ethic often caused him to overlook. For Gabriella, Blake offered not just security but a partnership of equals. He valued her mind, respected her career, and supported her passion for teaching in tangible ways, establishing a foundation to provide resources for underserved schools in the district. One evening, 3 months after they'd officially started dating, Blake suggested a picnic in the garden where they'd first connected over troublesome roses. "The roses look much happier now," Gabriella noted as she spread a blanket beneath the relocated plants, which were now flourishing in their sunnier location. "They just needed the right environment to thrive," Blake said, unpacking a basket filled with her favorite foods. "Like people, I suppose." They ate as the sun set, talking about Gabriella's plans for her summer break and Blake's newest hotel project. When they finished the strawberry tart he'd had his chef prepare specially, Blake reached into his pocket. "I have something for you," he said, suddenly looking uncharacteristically nervous. Gabriella watched curiously as he pulled out a small velvet box. Her heart began to race. "Blake." "Before you say anything," he interrupted, "I know this might seem fast. And if you think it is, that's completely okay. This can be a promise for the future instead." He opened the box to reveal a stunning emerald ring surrounded by diamonds. "But I know with absolute certainty that I love you, Gabriella Hayes. You walked into my life unexpectedly, and now I can't imagine a single day without you in it." Tears filled her eyes as he continued. "I never thought that offering protection to a stranger would lead to finding the love of my life, but that's exactly what happened. You've brought joy and purpose and light into my world in a way no one ever has before." He took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" Gabriella's hands trembled as she reached for his face, cradling it between her palms. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000 times yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, she added, "And for the record, it doesn't feel too fast to me. When you know, you know." Blake's smile was radiant as he pulled her into his arms, sealing their engagement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and protection, not because she needed it anymore, but because they had chosen each other, against all odds and expectations. 6 months later, they married in an intimate ceremony in the garden where he had proposed. Gabriella's kindergarten class served as flower children, scattering rose petals down the aisle with more enthusiasm than precision, much to the delight of the guests. During their vows, Blake spoke of how a desperate situation had led to an unexpected blessing. How in trying to provide safety for someone in need, he had found his own heart's sanctuary. Gabriella, in turn, spoke of the courage to accept help, to trust again after fear, and to open herself to love when it appeared in the most unexpected package. "You didn't just save me from danger," she told him, her voice carrying clearly across the gathered friends and family. "You showed me that sometimes The bravest thing we can do is let someone else into the fortress we build around our hearts. Their honeymoon took them to the Italian countryside, where they spent lazy days exploring vineyards and ancient villages, and nights wrapped in each other's arms under star-filled skies. It was there, in a centuries-old garden overlooking the Mediterranean, that Gabriella shared the news that their family would be growing by one the following spring. Blake's joy was boundless, his plans for the baby's nursery beginning before they even returned home. The man who had once been defined by his business acumen and wealth now found his greatest identity in being Gabriella's husband, and soon a father. 2 years after their wedding, on a crisp fall morning, Blake stood in the doorway of their home, watching as Gabriella chased their toddler daughter through piles of leaves in the garden. Their son, just 3 months old, was cradled against his chest in a baby carrier, sleeping soundly. "Daddy." "Come play," called their daughter, her curly hair bouncing as she ran toward him. "Coming, sweetheart," he answered, carefully stepping into the yard so as not to wake the baby. As he joined his family in their simple game, Blake reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought him here. A desperate call from a security employee, a broken window, a woman in need of sanctuary. These ordinary events had changed the course of his life forever. Gabriella caught his thoughtful expression and came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about, love?" He smiled, pulling her close with his free arm. "Just that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected beginnings." She rose on tiptoes to kiss him softly. "I think that's true of all great love stories. They never start where you think they will. And they never end where you expect either," he added, gazing at their children with wonder. "They just keep growing into something more beautiful than you could have imagined." As their daughter tugged impatiently at their hands, eager to continue their game, Blake and Gabriella exchanged a look of perfect understanding. In each other they had found not just love, but a home, a safe harbor after the storm, built on trust, respect, and the kind of love that transforms everything it touches. And that, they both knew, was worth all the unexpected beginnings in the world.